Chi. Yeah. Et bonsoir à tous, my name is Corentin Walou. As you can tell, I'm French, and that totally makes sense since I'm the co-host of the French gaming podcast ZQSD. Usually at ZQSD we have French-speaking guests, such as the lovely people who developed Life is Strange, Mother Bleeds, Out There, Event Zero, Dead Cells, or the new Monster Boy and Wonder Boy games. But last summer we had the opportunity to interview one of the most influential developers of the last decade, Jenova Chen. For 1 hour, we talked about video games and art, about Flower, Journey, and his new game, Sky, Children of the Light. Our French audience loved it. We had a lot of positive feedbacks, people telling us that it was a very inspiring interview. So, for the first time, we decided to broadcast one of our podcasts in English for an English-speaking audience. We hope you'll enjoy it. Here we go.
Jenova Chen, as we say in French, bonjour.
Bonjour.
And welcome and thank you so much for coming here because we are quite honored by your presence. Such an inspiring personality as you are. All your games change our lives, so I'm very delighted to talk about your creative process and your work during all those years.
I have to say that I'm grateful that you guys give me the opportunity to talk to you and to the players in France. That this is the first time I'm in this country, and I'm already humbled by the presence of everything of the city, and it's almost like. This is just my tourist first impression. I felt like this whole country, the city, is a giant art piece, and I've never been to any place with this much, I don't know what to say, beauty?
Oh, yeah, it's a good word.
Yeah.
Almost 7 years passed between Journey and Sky.
Mm-hmm.
So the first question I wanted to ask is, where have you been all those years?
I've been working on this one game for 7 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's kind of a marathon and also quite a test of my personal ego and my personal faith. It's a long story. I don't know where to start, but
wherever you want.
Yeah, I've spent 7 years making this game. Yeah.
I wondered if you needed, after all these years working with Sony on bigger and bigger titles, if you needed a break from the video game universe.
Honestly, this is so fun, and making games to me is very relaxing. So even if I would have a break, I'd probably be thinking about what kind of games can I make next, right? So I don't really see developing game as much of a stress, and the stress from the work mostly coming from working with people, like dreaming up a concept for a world and building it and testing it and improving it is just so much fun. And the challenge comes from mostly, okay, can your publisher give you money? Can your team member stay optimistic where the game is going, right? Can the investor believing that there's value for supporting a company that has not shipped the game for 7 years, right? So these are most difficult part of life is people for me. Making the game, writing the code is quite relaxing.
Do you consider making games as a kind of a personal therapy?
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think most of the creators, the movie directors, the authors, they create those things for both themselves and the others. It's certainly a therapy, for sure.
There is a question we ask to many creators is Do you remember the moment when you decided to make video games as a
Mhm.
creator? Did it happen when you were playing yourself with a specific game?
Yeah. I have to say this is at a very young age. I think most of the creators are all had the same experience around 8 to 14 years old. That's when our brain was developing the frontal cortex, and when we can be really impressed by something, and then because it grows over time, we would never forget those initial experience. Um, I remember Peter Jackson talk about the moment he wanted to make movie was when his dad took him to see Kong,
Hmm.
and how a puppeteered monster could make him feel, sorrow for the monster and cry. And so for him, for 8 years old boy, this is it. This is like the most powerful emotional experience you ever had the first time in your life. And he wanted to recreate that magic. And eventually he achieved his dream to bring Khan to the giant theater. And so for me, the story is similar. I think I was probably 12 when I was playing a video game called Legend of Swords and Fairy. It's a Chinese video game, but it's so much easier if you think about Final Fantasy VII, except for maybe 3 years earlier. It has a very similar story where you, as the main character, is playing RPG game, and you over the time you meet two girls who you are certainly both fond of. One is more like how to say uh, tomboyish, and
Hmm.
the other one is more the classic princess. And then you fall in love with both girls, and then as you travel, one of them dies, right? Uh, and you've been traveling with them for over hours and hours of play, and you suddenly lost the person. And this is, I mean, very much of a trope if you look from adults' perspective, because there's many literature that talk about things like that. But for me as a child, this is the first time I experienced a sense of loss. Um, Across all media, right? Like my parents limit what type of movie I can see or what kind of TV I can see. So video games, they don't have a filter. So that was my first emotional experience. And afterwards, I cried. I cried very hard, and historically, um, I I I remember I spent days think about why I cried. Uh, what happened at that moment? Why did I have this experience? And then I start to think about what happened to the character in the game. What happened to the choice I've made? Uh, I start to think about who am I, and am I going to grow up and live like the main character of the game I played, or should I live a different life? I start to think about the consequences of the choices I've made in the game. And eventually, after I think about over a week, I decided I want to grow up to be a different person. I want to follow certain moral code that I picked up from the game. And at that point, I felt like I'm a better person. Um, and that's the moment where I felt so cool, so grateful, but it's so cool that someone somewhere could make something that made me a better person. Um, and from that point on, I know this is the coolest thing I could ever do. I want to do in life. And the funny thing is, at the time, I never thought I'm gonna make a game. I just know I want to create art. I want to create something that could reach and touch someone that make their life better. Um, but my parents, as I grew up, always tell me that video games is as low as gambling and drugs. So I never thought I would be a game developer all the way until I was in graduate school in America. The whole time I was thinking, well, that game that really touched me. But there's also equal powerful thing that I've seen, like uh, Disney animations, movie like Godfather or The Matrix. I mean, I was literally thinking out of all the media, film or animation is the most cutting edge and cool. So for a very long time, I assumed that my dream is to be a animation director, and my dream is to get a job in Pixar. So I went to America. I went to the film school. I studied animation. I'm on the track to, get an internship to Pixar. But I'm running out of money. I have, China was pretty poor as when I was growing up, and unlike today. But I essentially, my parents' entire lifetime saving could not afford 1 year of tuition at the film school. And I told them, don't worry about it. I will figure out a way to get money. Just give me all your savings so I can go to America to study film, which is kind of crazy. So I had tremendous pressure of making money so I can survive the 3-year graduate program. And they have this thing called a game innovation grant. Well, people can pitch game ideas that is different from the mainstream market. And so I can win $20,000, which is like a year worth of tuition. And so I needed the money so bad that I tried to think about how can I make a game that's different from mainstream. And then that game become very popular. It's called Cloud. At that point, it just shoots my entire career into making games.
It's quite touching what you're telling me, because I have the feeling that the first video games you played touched a reality, a feeling that you already have in yourself, and that you waited for this medium to awake.
Yeah. It's indeed. I was always feeling like I'm an artist. I want to touch people, but I just don't know what's my canvas. I did a little bit, game making in high school, and I made 3 games in college. But I always thought, oh, this is kind of fun because I like to play games. But I never thought that's a career until 2004, when our school wanted to promote their gaming program. So they took all the students to GDC, and this is the first time I attend, a gaming conference. Before, I always go to SIGGRAPH because that's where all CGI animation is going. So I went to the GDC and attended the award ceremony, and I saw these people, mostly indies, went up stage and accepting the award, and I see how happy they are, how much how passionate everybody is. And that's the moment it hits me. It's like games is not drugs. It's not gambling. It should not bring shame to my family. I see these people are so proud. They're thanking their family to support them. And that's the moment I felt like game can be a career. It was quite, the last minute when I actually decided to become a game developer.
You spent, as you said, your lifetime between China and United States. Do you think this bicultural nature of yours influence or structure your creative process nowadays?
Okay, it's a double-edged sword. So when I first went to the film school, I was seriously thinking about trying to become the next Ang Lee, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. And in the first semester, I have to take this screenwriting class where you have supposed to write dialogues of people talking, and I really, really sucked at it. And the teacher just like, this does not sound like anybody who would be speaking in America. Why don't you just give up and write in Chinese? At least we can believe those characters. And I just kept not wanting to write Chinese because I'm like, I spent all this effort to leave my country. I wanna write something for the world, And And I was trying to write sci-fi because I started to realize, I didn't grow up in the Western culture. I have no idea what cowboys or football. This is not soccer, football, American football. Uh, what are those people into, and what is funny? I have to learn all these things. Um, and I realized even in the film directing class, I have trouble directing the actors because all sound designers. I was literally telling the sound designer, I need a sound of the summer, right? And I grew up watching Japanese anime, so there's summertime. There's all these what you call it, the insect. They make this loud sound, right?
Crickets?
Not crickets. It's cicadas. Yeah, cicadas.
Okay.
Yeah, you guys have never seen it,
No.
right? So it's in Asia, it's in every country. They are really, really loud, right? So people associate the hottest summer with the loudest cicadas. And I was telling the sound designer to give me that sound because that's how I connect with hot summer. It was taking me like 3 tries to explain to them, and they still could not get it. So they gave me the cricket sounds, which does not feel anything. So I realized there's so much culture differences in terms of reality and cinema that I have trouble. There's no way I'm gonna be able to really become a movie director because so much thing is based on reality. But then I realized most of the writings I did in sci-fi kind of work because it's not based on the culture. So what I learned as a bicultural person is that just give up. Just give up. Don't try to be a movie director. Work on something that is completely abstract and universal, then you have a chance. One of my biggest heroes is Hayao Miyazaki, right? And his anime, even though very Japan, it was universally liked, in Europe, in America, in China. We all adored the creations of Studio Ghibli. And so I was trying to study why his work is liked across the globe. And I realized that his theme, which is flight, is a universal theme. His subject is usually the conflict of war and peace, industrialization, and nature. And those are the things that it's not bound by the geographies. And I started to realize that the reason he could work out is because he's talking about something that's much fundamental to the humanity than a local culture. In a way, the more specific you are tied to a culture, the more likely you will be a fad, and the more fundamental human you create something, the more likely you will be timeless. And so from that point on, I felt, why should I even bother focusing on words and cultures? I should focus on what is fundamentally human. And because of Miyazaki's work, I had the kind of blind faith that, if you're working towards the truth, people will understand. Yeah.
Is it why you often choose to create silent characters because it's the most universal language?
Yeah, it's growing up. I mean, I realized that I'm always suck at literatures. Even in my own language, my Chinese is like always the worst in the class. And one big inspiration I had was my composer Vincent Diamante, who did the Flower and Sky, and he used to say this thing. He felt like sometimes he thinks the language is so low resolution. He could not find the right words to communicate to his girlfriend when they had a fight. So he had to write a music to catch how he feel when that happened. And I actually really, really agree. I was fortunate enough to run into some linguistics, and people were talking about how, compared to the the native Indian language with the Western Latin language, there are certain words that's just missing. How in the Western language, material is a word, resources is a word. When they come to Native America, they could not translate that because the Native American only have words like brothers, because that's what food to them is. The cow, the buffaloes are their brothers, and when they kill them, they will say sorry, right? But I need your flesh for, my family. But when the American come, well, these are just meat. So, and how that really changes, and how there's another linguistic guy from Hawaii, and he's talking about how it is such an island culture. Internally they say whatever you throw out will come back because the waves will push anything back, and so they have a very different view about what trash is, right? And anyway, so even in China, we have a word called xiao, which means you have to have blind faith obedience towards your senior. And I couldn't find the words to describe that. Anyway, I'm just giving you these examples of like just how terrible, how incapable words are in capture the nuances. And that's why there's poetry. Poetry is essentially you have such a low resolution pixels of words that you have to use the combination and the tempo to create something that appear to be more high resolution. I mean, it's also kind of like what pixel art is. Pixel artists using just the 16 colors, they could make something that looks like reality. Anyway, the wrong use of words often get myself into a fight with my wife. So going back to language, I suck at it so much, but I recognize how terrible I'm at that. Anytime I wanted to write a dialogue for my character, I had to change it 10 times, 20 times. It's just not working. And I realized that sometimes if you leave it empty, the player will fill in their best version, and it's usually better than whatever I can write. Yeah. So yeah, from that point on, I've been avoiding using text as much as I could.
I sense a very strong willing to theorize your work, and indeed, if your games have a strong connection with your studies and the notion of experiment itself. For example, you created the game Flow to illustrate your master thesis about concept of, if I'm correct, dynamic difficulty adjustment.
Yes.
Still today, do you consider yourself as a theorist while you're working on your games?
Yeah, a lot of people told me they are surprised how rational I am at talking my game. Yeah, to the point that they're disappointed that I'm not this emotional being. But I would say that there's I do have a lot of feelings when I create works, but when I talk to people, I find sharing my feelings don't necessarily get anywhere.
Yeah.
And sharing my feelings with my team, they just see me as an emotional person. That does not help them to find the solutions of how to make the game better. And almost like in order to communicate better with my team, I have to become a teacher. I have to like teach them how to capture something. So I start to condense. As someone saying, teaching is the best way of learning. If I really feel I understand something, I have to be able to teach it to my team. Why we should do it this way. And turns out that I'm actually quite good at it. So I grew up learning coding. So I'm both an artist and also engineer. So sometimes I like to apply both to make things work. even Journey, even though my inspiration is very emotional driven, the execution is very, very like a machine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you say that every game for you, every starting point, sorry, of making games should be a concept for you to analyze? You have to research something every time.
That's how I feel it's fun. I
Yeah.
have to learn something each project. Otherwise, what's the point of wasting 3 years, 4 years, or 7 years on something if you don't learn anything? Your work is not interesting.
Mm.
So when we work on flow, so I always start a project with a desire, with a problem to solve, and then I have to do a lot of learning to solve the problem. But once it's solved, you learned a tool, you learned a technique, and you kind of want to keep using it in the future games. So that's how I stack my games. So when we work on flow, my desire is to find a way to allow gamers and non-gamers to enjoy the game at their own pace. Because most of hardcore game is too hard for casual players, but the casual games are too boring to the hardcore. And we learned that from making Cloud. Cloud is my first game that really had a hit. It attracted a lot of people who never played games, and half of them are really, really happy with the game, and half of them was like, "How do I play this? I don't know. Can you show me a tutorial? Like, is there an instruction menu?" Don't you play World of Warcraft? It's the same control scheme, right? But then they never played it, and I feel sorry for them because we made this game called Cloud, where you can fly into the sky and using the clouds to shape into animals and create weather systems and clean the city using the rain. And so a lot of people who belong to this society called the Cloud Appreciation Society heard about this game and they want to play it. And I'm really happy that these 40 to 50-year-old men and women who never played the game, who despise the game just like my parents, wanted to try this. So I'm so happy they're here. And then when they told me they don't know how to play the game and their experience was really frustrating, I feel really guilty because I kind of screwed up the chance to make more people love games. And so that's why I wanted to figure out how can I redesign the game so even these people who never played games can enjoy it. And so I started to work on flow, and all my professor has taught me about the flow theory while I was in school, but I never paid attention to it. I never really read the book. But this time it's different. I really want to solve this problem. So I went back, I read the book again, and I had some revelation, right? Like how I can use the theory to allow people to engage the game at their own pace. And so flow turns out to be super addictive because it very easily can bring you into the flow zone. And then I thought, okay, this is really proving it. It has 6 million people who play it back in 2005. And then I was like, okay, now I can actually bring new players and they will have no trouble enjoying the experience. Let me focusing on what was really unique about Cloud, which is the emotions that many people who wrote to us to say that they've never experienced any game that make them feel like this. And they even said, please tell you and your team, at the school that you're beautiful people. I grew up my entire life, my parents, my grandparents, my cousins, nobody said I'm a beautiful person. My wife wouldn't even say I'm a beautiful person, right? This is the only time in my entire life someone said that you are beautiful. And I really took that seriously. And I thought about what did we just do? Like, what caused these people to tell me this? The Cloud game was made in school, so it's a very poorly executed game. It crashes every time a window pops out during the play. And so the only thing that really made a difference is because it is a game that has a feeling. I grew up in Shanghai, which they call the Paris of the East, right? it's a concrete jungle. It's all city. And during that time, China is going through the industrial booming, and there's a lot of pollution in the city. We didn't know. We just thought, well, it's always very foggy, but they are actually smog. We don't know. We grew up, and many of us were having, kind of asthma. So I was the kid who has asthma every single year. Every time my birthday arrives, I'm always basically coughing. I cannot sleep on the bed. I have to sit through the whole night just to not cough. Because at the time in China we don't have inhalers, so I have just to live through the allergy every single year. So I was quite miserable back then. And when I made this cloud game, initially I wanted to create a game where it's like Sim City, where you can simulate the atmosphere. So I was trying to make the character to be somewhere from Jupiter, which is a gas planet, so they can manipulate gas. But my professor, Tracy Fullerton, asked me, what if the main character of your game is a boy? And that basically is the most important advice of my life, right? I was like, okay, a boy. What kind of game can that be? A boy? How is a boy gonna change the clouds? And so I put my own childhood experience in it. I was mostly in hospital. I can't play with kids outside. I have to daydream. Maybe I can fly out the window to play with the birds. And so the game is about a sick boy daydreaming that he could fly. And maybe because I subconsciously pick up the pollution problem, so in the game I just wanted to create rain to wash the city so it becomes more saturated and the air will become more clean. So the game doesn't have any enemies or scores. It's just like a few pieces that is coming from my childhood desires. And many people cried for the game. We had 600,000 downloads for a zip file that was like 60 megabytes. Imagine 2004 or 2005. Nobody would download a random zip file. There's so many worms and virus. And that game essentially changed the course of my life. That recommendation from my teacher, from making a simulator game into a game that is about my own expression.
Yeah.
And then later when I come back after Flow, when we were making Flower, now connecting the dots, like what is a flower game? It's a 7-flower pot living in a polluted urban apartment. Each flower had a dream. That is all my dream. The first flower wanted to be with nature. The second flower wanted the city to have color. The third flower hated the summer heat. And it's very moisture and wet and hot. I'm sure it's similar to Paris in the summer.
Yes.
And it wanted a breeze, right? And the fourth flower wanted the light. And eventually the final flower wanted all of them to happen to the city that I grew up in. It's very flower is a very personal expression. That's why I like this game even more than Journey, because Journey is more about the classical mythical story that has been passed around for thousands of years. But what were we just talking about?
I was dreaming with you, but if, indeed, Flower is very groundbreaking for one reason. Personally, the first game that you realize that you only need Leaf to experience a very rare notion in video games. It's the time present. Many philosophers have described the time present as the notion of happiness, when you don't have to rely on the past, you don't have to expect the future, you're just experiencing the true happiness in front of you. And Flower is like that. You don't have a specific goal, you just want to be in the wind.
Yeah, the development of that game is also kind of crazy. We spent 2 years making the game. we spent 1.5 years just screwing around and failing. We don't know what the game is. And we tried 13 different gameplay prototypes. Most of them were trying to make a game where, because initially we spent maybe first month to create the field. The inspiration is this. Shanghai was mostly just cities. There's not much nature. And as a city boy, I always thought that's the center of the universe. Everybody wants to get into Shanghai, just like New Yorkers who think very highly about them and the city. So I never really left Shanghai because it was like, who cares? This is the center of the country. So the first time I'm really surrounded by nature is when I'm in the United States, when I was driving from Los Angeles to San Francisco. In the middle of that place, there's a valley where people are growing a lot of agriculture. So you can see this kind of a grass field extended all the way to the horizon. That's just grass. I had to stop the car because it's like seeing an ocean of nature. And I was so impressed that I felt like this reminds me of the Windows 95 wallpaper. Right? And I was just like, this is just surreal. Only till this year, I just found out that field is where the photo was taken.
Really?
Yeah, that was actually where the Windows 95 wallpaper was made. It was literally the same view I saw. And I've never seen this much green. And I was just so impressed by the feeling. I wanted to capture it, to share with the people that I grew up with in the city. I felt like they need to see this. And just like someone who grew up in a desert and it's the first time they see the ocean, And so in the first 2 months of flower development, we were trying to capture the feeling of that grass ocean. And very quickly, we have it. And the Sony people came and they tried the game. They were like, well, this is all fun and impressive, but what is the game? You need to have some challenge, right? So then we start to add things like, oh, if you launch into the air and if you don't control yourself and you land it in a pond, you die, right? You're supposed to be a seed and you have to carry it out. Whatever gameplay we try that involves a challenge, we often find ourselves, but also playtesters, to curse if they fail. It's like if you throw a basketball into a hoop, success, and then it bounces out. You're like, shit, right? And when we create flower, we wanted the people to feel that presence of nature is supposed to be a harmonious and peaceful feeling. And so every single gameplay we tried just keep making people curse. We tried like a timed challenge, like Katamari Damacy. You have to grow your petals into this size within this time frame. And when people fail, they curse. So it was very difficult. Like we try like a puzzle game where you have to find 3 flowers in the red color and 5 in blue to cause a puzzle to kind of unlock. But when you are actually playing the game like that, you're like, wait, how many flower do I have that, I missed maybe 2 blue ones? Oh, okay. You can't actually enjoy the emotion because you're so busy using your rational side of your brain. It just doesn't feel right. And then eventually on the 13th prototype, it's more kind of like a synesthesia game where, what you touch and the music is all working. There's really not much goals besides just touching all the dots. Then the emotion was working right. I would say we almost have no real ways of like recreating that. We were just lucky we landed on that. And then we catch that lightning and then we spend the next 6 months making it into a game. Yeah.
Speaking of this connection with nature, there is a common theme in your game, is the relationship between the avatar and the matter itself, the elements, feeling the wind in flower, feeling the sand in journey. In sky, it's many things like the candlelight, or more specifically the clouds. which are absolutely astonishing. Is it conscious from you to give the player the notion of feeling the matter itself?
So there's the emotional side of this, and then there's the rational side of this. Which one do you want to hear first?
As you wish. What interests you the most?
So at film school, what we learned how to make a successful movie is you have to have a very good story, and then you have to tell it really, really well. And that's how you make a successful movie. But then there's a third element, which we don't really talk about, which is you have to have a spectacle. So I'll give you an example. So imagine Jaws without the mechanical shark, or Jurassic Park without the dinosaurs, just like lions and tigers. Would that be a hit? I mean, the story is still good. You have these characters who have their things, and at the end of the movie, they change into a different characters. But would anybody go rushing in lines to go to see the movies? Probably not, right? The spectacles is what really brought a lot of audience to waiting in lines. And the fact then the story is well told, then they will tell their friends, you got to see this movie, right? And so spectacle has been a thing that we focus on for commercial games. If you make Flower or Flow or any games, what is the thing that people really have never seen before? They want to try. And so when we work on console game, we are competing with AAA huge teams using Unreal with loads of artists. And how can we create a visual that stand out? And so when I made Flow with 2 people, everybody was making Flash games, but we were like, hey, here's Flash 2.0. They supported Glow. But Glow is so expensive that if you use that effect, you can't really do anything else. So we made a game that is using drawing lines, which is costing nothing, plus glow. So this is like the first time you see a Flash game that things are glowing, and you're playing at very high fidelity and frame rate. And I think that really kind of was a reason why Flow was so popular. 6 million people was playing that game while I was still in school. Is it because it has the visual spectacle that nobody have seen? And so when we work on Flower, our game engine is nothing. It's like we just barely are building an engine for the PlayStation like 4 months before they launch. Like we have no feature, and so Flow was pretty much just like models moving, and that's the whole engine. So when we were making Flower, we don't even have animation. We can't play animation of a 3D model. That's like how poorly prepared our engine was. And so we were talking about, we're debating, like how are we, what are the features we need to support? We can spend the next 6 months building our own animation features just to catch up. But what if we throw our investment into something that people are not building? And so as I was making these art of flower fields and grass, like nobody really put computing on the grass. What if we just make the entire PlayStation to run Grass Simulator, right? Because Unreal would never do that, And so then we were like, okay, let's double hand down into this visual features. We can't compete on everything, but we're gonna do the best grass of all histories, right? I think till to this day, nobody's like gonna put audio computing on grass. And so that really is kind of like the beginning of how we start to like do our technology differently from the other studios. When we made Journey, I really wanted to do cloth simulation better than other games, so that the entire game, so everything is made of cloth, right? And then later we realized how much sand we're doing. We're like, well, we got to make the sand look better than any other games. And so those are where we spent 3 years polishing the sand feature, right? So that nobody has done anything like that. and for sky, the cloud is our choice. And just to let you know, we've worked on that cloud feature in the first 3 years, and then after that, the man who's in charge of the cloud has left, and we never touched it until today. And guess what? 4 years later, that cloud still looks good because nobody's spending time doing that. And so that's kind of like from a rational reason why we always pick an element and we really put in the time that nobody would have thought about. So to create the spectacle. But at the emotional side, what we create, I think a lot of that is me and the art director, Matt Nava. Matt Nava left TGC after Journey, and if you see his next game, Abzu, is also very elemental. Actually, when he was in TGC, we already talked about, next game should be in the water or in the forest.
Okay.
So you can see Pathless is coming.
Sure.
Is that I think fundamentally we share this desire of connecting with nature. We are now dominating Earth. we're terminating all other life types. All the other race of animals are replaced by human being now, and we are quite lonely as a species. The only people who live with us is now pigeons and rats and cockroaches. I think this is, again, I'm analytical. So I'm trying to explain to you why I feel this way. We were tribal animals that live in a world of awe and danger and unknown. Back then, sorry, I'm sidetracking. So a lot of us are afraid of public speeches. Have you noticed that? If you want to go up to talk to a lot of people, it's your heart pumps and you almost sense a danger. I heard this from a psychologist. He said this is our basic survival instinct. I was like, why is talking to people a survival, right? I mean, people will say, like, if you scratch the chalkboard, you hear this sound and you're just like, you want to run away. Because back then, there's a creature that makes that sound, right? Anybody who doesn't run away is dead. But why are we afraid of public speaking? They said, because back then, we are humble tribes. If your village don't like you, you will be dead. Because you need a whole village to support, to provide food, to protect you, so you will live, right? If we are just 5 people, we are living in the wild. Everyone has to count on each other to do their job to stay alive, and the potential of being disliked by the entire tribe is so scary. It's death. That's why you're afraid of talking to about a lot of people, because you're afraid that you could be disconnected. And a lot of people today are very, very lonely, particularly people who live in the big city or people who work in the big corporations, because you felt that without you, everyone around you would just live normally. And a lot of people kill themselves in the modern society. They are not lack of food or water or entertainment. They kill themselves because they felt nobody around them needs them. And that is a feeling I feel a lot of people start to feel more and more, is because you are no longer in a tribe. You're no longer needed by anyone. And that makes you feel lonely. And when we are in tribe, you're irreplaceable to the tribe. You're the guy who fetches water for the tribe every day. Everybody is depending on you, right? And you're depending on others. But when you are just a suit at the desk in a company, you're replaceable. this is stretching out a bit far because this is also my inspiration for Journey.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, I think we miss, as a race, we're missing our connection. We're missing the feeling of awe, and the dependency with each other, because we're so far from nature now.
Is it why you wanted to make Sky as a game that will reconnect people through their phones? Because you're right. I was in the subway this morning.
Mhm.
Everyone has a mobile phone.
Mhm.
Everyone is connected to the world,
Mhm.
but everyone is isolated in its own environment. Nobody look at each other.
Mhm.
Did you want to use mobile phone to recreate this notion of altruism and connection between people?
I gave a talk recently, just at Leo.
Yeah,
I
you were in Lille yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah, and I showed a picture. This is a drawing I made in 2006, before I even started that game company. This is the picture what started the Journey project. I just couldn't make this game back then, so it slept for 3 years.
I'm just translating in French. Donc il me montre
Hey,
son écran d'ordinateur.
It's Corentin again. So, at this point of the interview, Jenova is showing to Jan an artwork on his computer where you can see hooded characters who are facing a wall of smoke.
Okay, so this is an image that I felt because I was very, very lonely while I was in college, graduate school. I had to work on 5 different part-time jobs while making cloud and trying to earn money to pay the tuitions. So as an absolutely poor guy who doesn't speak good English in America, I couldn't get anybody to date me. I'm a very lonely person and I'm really busy. And so for a very long time, I hoped that maybe the land of video games can connect me to someone. So I was playing World of Warcraft. But the problem is, in those games, it's mostly about looting. And so whenever the raid starts, that's when the conversation stops. And when the raids end, everybody's gone. So I didn't find a real friend in World of Warcraft. And also because once they know I don't speak good English on Ventrilo, I'm actually a guy, even though I'm using a female orc, they don't find talking to me as interesting anymore. And so I was dreaming about a place, a game, a virtual space where I could actually not feel alone. And to feel not alone, my intuition made this painting is I felt like I want to feel I can trust someone who's going to take me to safety. In this image, these giants are walking over the snows. If I don't walk carefully, I will be stomped. So I hold hands of someone in front of me who knows where it's a safe place to go. But at the same time, I realize it's more important that there are someone who's depending on me. Their life depends on me and they trust me. And so I'm holding the hands of someone else. And that's the moment I felt I'm not alone because there's a purpose for me to be in this world. That people are depending on me. And also, there are people I trust unconditionally. And that was my intuitive feeling of what it needs to be not alone. And then I made Journey, it's not an MMO, so I can't holding hands of 2 people. You only meet one at a time. And the most important thing about Journey is I don't want to be labeled. I don't want to play a game where people are saying, "Oh, you're Asian," or "You're not American," or "You're too old," or "You're too young." I just wanted to have a human-to-human connections where I can trust someone and they trust me, right? Yeah. That's the initial feeling that I had because I was so lonely at the time, and I wanted to capture that feeling of connection. Yeah. And Journey is like the first attempt. And so in Sky, finally you can hold the hands of 2 people.
Yeah, what's very interesting is there are many co-op experience in video games, but not many who rely on a simple notion, which is empathy. How do you think about empathy when you are creating gameplay? It's very difficult to make, I assume.
Yeah, I think so. The funny thing is, I'm telling you all these reasons because I would look back and trying to put things into patterns to explain in a way that it's easy to understand. But when I make the game, I have no idea. But now the Journey game was made, I can tell you that one of the most fundamental thing to connect the two people together is vulnerability. Today, most of the games is very about empowerment. You grow your character, so you get strong. You defeat any obstacles, right? Monsters can be slaughtered. You are so empowered in a way that you are not vulnerable. You're invincible, right? If just think about all the multiplayer games, Call of Duty, Left 4 Dead, you're invincible, really. You have guns, you kill hundreds of zombies. When you're so powerful, your focus, it's like giving someone a gun. You put 3 people in a room and you give one of them a gun. I'm pretty sure the gun will be used at some point because you have power. And people would just be curious to try out the power, right? And they wouldn't be thinking about, if you put Batman and Superman in a room, you'll be thinking them going to be duking out to see who's better. You're not going to think that they are going to now become best friends, right? So when do we actually turn down our intentions of using our power, but instead want to connect with someone? If you go to Times Square and you try to stop somebody and talk to them, they'll be like, you must be crazy, right? Oh, are you going to rob me, right? But if you go to the wilds, you're hiking in a very dangerous place that nobody around, and there's a sign that says there's a bear here or wolf here, and you run to another person, you'll be like, oh my God, there's another person. Hey, be careful. I think I saw the wolf right down there. Right? Why are you suddenly friendly? Because you felt you're vulnerable. And because you felt you're small. The nature is unknown, and you can't overpower anything. And that is when we used to be, when we are little tribes, when the worlds around us are unknown and difficult to handle. And we have to explain these things that we don't understand using religions. The early religions of gods are animals because we don't understand them. They're powerful. They can kill you. They can, you can't do anything about them. Modern day now, they're just food. They are just stock and livestocks, right? And those are the emotions we're missing in this current society. The feeling of small and how the world around us is filled with unknown and, anyway, I'm going sidetracked, but vulnerability, right? The feeling of small led us to unite with others because together we're bigger. So for Journey, we spent a long time making mistakes to understand this simple fact. Initially, our character has arms. Everybody's like ninjas. Like people can punch each other, and they just treat each other so badly that nobody's going to really connect with each other to be friends. We have to cut their arms off so people stop thinking about punching people or throwing people off, and they just think about coexisting. And when they have hands, they run to the monster. Their first instinct is, how am I going to kill this beast? Right? Because that's Shadow of the Colossus. It's the mentality shift. Once you have no hands, once you know the monster is going to hurt you so bad, now you realize you can't change this environment. You're completely weak. And then when you run into another person, realizing both of you are weak, then you help each other. And so those are the lessons I learned from Journey is, connection comes from vulnerability.
There is a beautiful paradox behind it. I have quite a few minutes to finish, but is that the virtual world can help us reconnect with the world as we think we know it, but we forgot how to know it.
I can't claim that we could do that through games. I think the nature itself is divine, and nobody can recreate divine. I'm just trying to capture a tiny little fragment of that in the games we create. But I definitely would say the sense of awe is what nature really is. It's so grand and large that we could never understand the full picture of it. And yeah, when we create journey, like the ending is what I think is, what I'm trying to portray, and hopefully people will feel, a portion of what the real nature is.
Yeah. So maybe one last question I can manage to ask you. After Journey, you were qualified as a new wave of author in indie games. There was a strong feeling that with video game we could experience things that we never experienced before. Do you think since Journey came out, this notion of using video games with a different approach has evolved itself? Did you have time to play other indie games? Do you feel confident for the medium itself?
Yeah. So my entire career was started because of the fans told us we're beautiful people. They also said, please make sure this game can become commercial, so more people would know that games aren't just about the killing and fighting, right? And games can be about other feelings. And over the time, I learned one thing, which is the only time when the media will be fully recognized by the public is the time people stop asking, are you a gamer or not? People don't ask you if you're a music listener or not. People don't ask you if you're a movie watcher or not. People only say, hey, honey, what kind of mood are you in? Let's listen to music. What kind of mood are you in? Let's watch a film. What kind of appetite are you in? Let's eat a dish, right? But for games, it's like, well, you either play games because you like these feelings or you don't. And so the only way for our medium to be fully legit and accepted by the society is when video game as an interactive medium covers all the emotions. I would show you another chart.
Sure.
Now Jenova is showing Yann a chart, a kind of mind map with the name of different genres like action, horror, fantasy.
Please.
If you look at the genres of music, novel, and movie, they're very similar. They divide their market into different feelings. For example, at the very top right is romantic genre. You have romantic novels, you have romantic music, and you have romantic movies, right? Look at how far it is from the blue curve. That's what men like. So this is the least enjoyable genre to men. Look at where a genre that's very close to the young man at 15 years old. Horror. Young kids love to be scared. Even though they're scared of it, they love it. And if you really think about what are the kids playing today, Slender Man, Friday Freddy are so popular on iOS stores. Like, I don't find this game attractive to me at all, but the kids loved it because it's scary. And they love to watch people who get scared. That's why PewDiePie was so popular, because he liked to play scary games and get scared, and the kids enjoy watching that. So, emotions, there's a wide range of emotion that's already established by other medium. But for video games, those are the emotions that we captured really, really well in the past 30 years on console. all the things that men like are already red ocean, very saturated market. Thriller. We have Silent Hill. We have Resident Evil. We have a lot of big franchise of thriller, sci-fi. We have Mass Effect. We have Star Wars. But outside that region, all the other emotions are very rarely done as a video game. Just romance, for example, or romantic comedy. Have you ever played a game that's both romantic and funny?
Very few.
Right? Or family, which is a genre that deals with the dynamics of husband, wife, children's. Little Miss Sunshine's, Emily in a way is a family genre. The only video game I've played that is family is Sims. And Sims is one of the top-selling PC game of all time because it monopolized the entire family genre. And over 93% of people who play Sims are women. And when's the last time you played a console game with a lot of women?
It has been a long time, yeah.
I remembered Guitar Hero.
Yeah.
And that's musical, which is at the bottom right. These are the emotions that actually attract women. But if you look at the bottom, which is the genre that attracts to adults, right? 15 years ago, when I first came to America, people were saying, hey, the average age of players are now 35 years old. In 15 years, everybody will be playing video games. And 15 years has passed. What is the average age of gamers? It's not 50 years old, right? Because those genres that would actually appeal to older men don't exist. And so what I want to do, or what I think, indie's job is to push the boundaries of the emotions that's capable. The game is capable. And to expand the market of games so that there's an emotional content for everybody. What I'm really happy to see is recently there's a emergence of comedy games. Human Fall Flat, Goat Simulator. Now there's the Untitled Goose Games. These are all funny games. And before this, the only thing that's funny you can think about is like Monkey Island. You have funny dialogues, but that's it. It's the dialogue that's funny. That's literature. That's not gameplay. Gameplay being funny is only recent. And so there will be a comedy there, right? But what about the rest of it? I think there's so much we have to do before we can really say that game is truly the next art form. And Journey, actually, on this chart is called Indie Art House. That strong, bitter, but, intense emotion is usually coming from indie art house movies, right? And so we are still missing a lot of things on this chart. And that's what I'm working on.
So the struggle continues every day.
Yeah, so I co-founded Annapurna Interactive, where we invest in games that is trying to fill in these holes. One of the games I really liked is The Vanishing of Edith Finch. Yeah. It's a black comedy. Okay, comedy is already rare in the game industry. And most of the comedy I just mentioned, they are like they are chapstick comedy. They are like Tom and Jerry.
Yeah.
But a black comedy, that's very new. What we do from TGC is we also want to expand from indies to other categories so that we could attract more people to love games.
Yeah, and we wish you the best luck for that. So I'm sorry that the time is running fast and you have a plane to catch. You were very kind to stay more than 1 hour, and we are very humbled by your coming. Thank you so much, Jenova Chen, for your inspiring talk about your games and indie game in general. I hope you found it interesting as well.
Well, thank you for having me being here. I really see France as a country where people value art above others, and I hope that our conversation could allow more people to discover our games and to see the possibility of game.
Yeah. Let's remind them that Skype have come out on mobile phone. It was in August, right?
Yeah, it's released at the end of July. We have Android coming soon. And Sky is going to be a cross-platform game, so there will be PC and console.
Cool.
But if you're interested in what we're doing, you can try it out on a mobile phone first.
Yeah. It was very enjoyable. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you for listening ZQSD. Thank you Jenova Chen. Thank you Yann François for hosting this podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe if you magically learned French during this podcast. And see you. Middle of invalid memory. Yeah.